It seems like science and religion are becoming more adversarial every day. I've seen people arguing about it in pretty much every venue. There are comment sections where people will basically verbally assault one another just for being on the other side. But how did this all start? I mean, science and religion ultimately have the same goal, right? To achieve a better understanding of the world around us. So, how did they become bitter rivals? Well, it didn't always used to be like this. Back in the day, things were a little simpler. In fact, the modern idea of religion didn't really exist until the 1600s at the earliest. This was around the same time as the Protestant Reformation, and people as a whole were starting to look at their beliefs with a more critical eye. The term science wasn't used until the mid-14th century, and didn't describe any kind of view on the world like it does today. It was a very broad term that really just kind of referred to any kind of body of knowledge. And the word scientist itself wasn't used until 1834. Before we get too far in, I just want to say that I'm not attacking either side. I think that science and religion are both important in their own way. I just think that this war has warped things in a very toxic way. In the beginning, these two ideas didn't really have any compatibility issues. Science was just seen as an extension of a belief in God. Early scientists, or natural philosophers as they were called prior to the 19th century, were more often than not very religious people, and they viewed their studies as a way to more deeply understand God and the nature of the universe. Isaac Newton believed in God. Al-Khwarizmi, the inventor of algebra, was a devout follower of Islam. And even Charles Darwin, whose work is the foundation of modern evolutionary biology, was a man of God. The list goes on, and I won't waste your time listing off hundreds of names, but the point is, a lot of these early scientists were also very firm in their beliefs in some kind of God. The issue started arising when scientific understanding started to conflict with what religions taught as true. The most famous example would probably have to be Galileo Galilei. He was a strong supporter of the heliocentric model. The heliocentric model of the solar system was just the idea that the sun was in the middle and everything orbited around the sun, instead of everything orbiting around the Earth. We now know that he was right, but advocating for this back in the 1600s was kind of a big deal. In 1633, there was a trial that deemed him vehemently suspect of heresy, and his books were banned, and he was put under house arrest. It probably didn't help that he called geocentrics simpletons, though. This example is a little more messy than academics were heliocentrics and religious people were geocentrics. There were actually both kinds of people on both sides. So at first, it wasn't so much a divide between the church and the academics, but a divide between two differing views on the solar system. However, some of the most staunch supporters of the geocentric view mostly used the Bible to support their claims, and heliocentrics often would use scientific observations to support their claims. So it eventually did turn into an argument of science versus the church. There are even examples of people agreeing with what Galileo saw through the telescope, but refusing to believe it because it was contrary to what the Bible said. The Bible didn't actually teach geocentrism, though. The problem here is that oftentimes people will see what they want to see in the text, and that gets accepted and taught and passed down. There are plenty examples of things that are taught in the church, even in modern ages, that aren't actually in the Bible. The other problem is that the Bible has been translated way too many times. Each translator is going to put their own spin on the translation, so they'll translate it in a way that supports their personal views. A good example of this is how the Bible didn't contain the word homosexual until the 1940s. There's actually a documentary about this, and I've been meaning to watch it. It's called 1946. But anyway, I digress. And language isn't always one for one, vocabulary-wise. So even if the translator didn't have an ulterior motive, a few liberties would have to be taken. Sayings such as letting the cat out of the bag don't always translate in a meaningful way, so the text needs to be changed to maintain meaning. But even then, oftentimes some of the meaning can get lost just due to cultural context. There are about 900 different English translations out there, and they often don't agree with each other. I found this article that goes into the issue with translation a little bit more, and I just wanted to share this section where they talk about different translations of the same passage. In this example, they're specifically looking at one word, raham, which can be translated to mean mercy, compassion, or a few other different ways. So let's look at these different translations of Psalm 79:8. The King James Version says, "O remember not against us former iniquities. Let thy tender mercies speedily prevent us, for we are brought very low." The New American Standard Bible says, "Do not hold us responsible for the guilty deeds of our forefathers. Let your compassion come quickly to meet us, for we have become very low." The Message says, "Don't blame us for the sins of our parents. Hurry up and help us. We're at the end of our rope." And the last example I wanted to bring up was the Living Bible, which translates that passage as, "Oh, do not hold us guilty for our former sins. Let your tender-hearted mercies meet our need, for we are brought low to the dust." As you can see from these examples, translation can be pretty messy and really open to interpretation. Now, if you have an allegorical or spiritual interpretation of the Bible, the overall message is often not changed too much, and you can usually figure out the moral of the story. But if you're coming from a literalist interpretation, then things can get a little weird. And that's what a lot of the geocentric view is based on, a literal interpretation of the Bible that had already been translated multiple times. So there's certainly a language issue on the religion side, from translations to the way that things are interpreted, but there's also a language issue on the science side. Specifically that science people tend to use some unnecessarily strong language. Now, I don't necessarily mean bad words, but oftentimes when talking to religious people, science people will tend to adapt a kind of mean and condescending way of talking. I don't really want to name names, as I'm not trying to start any beef here. Well, maybe I wouldn't mind naming Hank Green. I think it'd be fun to beef with him. But anyway, I think that every science communicator has done this at some point in their career. And I think this comes down to the "I'm right and you're wrong" mentality. Now, admittedly, people on the side of science are often the right ones, especially when we have people on the religious side that are arguing that the Earth is a 6,000-year-old flat disk, but I digress. The point here is that the best way to educate someone isn't to insult them and tell them how wrong and stupid they are. The best way you educate someone is by being their friend and generally leading them to start thinking more critically about what they believe and why. Many people do have blatantly wrong views. Now, I'm not saying that all religious views are wrong, but many churches do teach things that are blatantly wrong. Many people who hold these incorrect views are taught them from a young age and taught not to question the church. These views often become central to their religion, and their religion becomes central to their personal identity. So when someone is critical of their views, it feels like a personal attack on them. And if someone is aggressively critical, it usually is more than enough to put them into full defense mode. At that point, they're more interested in defending and justifying their own views than listening to the opposition. This can make things worse for a number of reasons, but the most important one is that defending your views like this oftentimes just entrenches you more into those ideas. So when advocates of science start talking aggressively and start attacking religious people's views, it actually makes them cling to their views even tighter. The important thing here to remember is compassion. The science community is oftentimes missing compassion, but the religious community is oftentimes missing flexibility. When one part of your religion is under attack, it feels like the whole thing is under attack, but that's often not the case. And I think it's important to remember that. Now, the big problem that the church had with Galileo was that they had a literal interpretation of the Bible and they weren't willing to be flexible on it. If they could have said, yeah, we were wrong about the shape of the solar system, things would have been fine and literally wouldn't have changed any of the major aspects of their religion. A belief in God doesn't necessitate a geocentric model. And a heliocentric model does not disprove God. But everyone was inflexible and dogmatic about that issue, and so it caused a big problem. Being flexible on these small things that would have no effect on the core tenets of your religion could save a lot of trouble. Admitting when you're wrong is actually a strength. But sometimes both sides can be right. Okay, stay with me, guys. The Bible says that the earth was made in 7 days. Science, on the other hand, says that the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old, and that it definitely took more than 7 days to form. Here's the thing though, the Hebrew word that they used for day can be interpreted in several different ways, one of them meaning an unspecified period of time. And honestly, we kind of use our word day in the same way too. When we say things like, back in my day, we aren't referring to a specific 24-hour day, but a general period in time. So if we use that interpretation of Earth's formation, then the Bible kind of does match up with the formation of Earth over 7 periods of time. If we also consider that Genesis would have been written from the perspective of Earth, then it really is a pretty close match. According to the Bible, the Earth was a dark, turbulent place in the beginning, and this was most likely the case. The Spirit of God was over the water could refer to life starting on hydrothermal vents in the sea. Then clouds started to clear and there was light. The crust solidified and plate tectonics, or God, created the land. God made plants on the land, and everything that we've seen suggests that land plants would have developed before land animals. The sky continued to clear, and the moon and stars were visible. Animals evolved, and then finally there was man. This isn't exactly 100% how science says that it happened, but it's pretty dang close. And like I said earlier, there's a lot of meaning that can be lost and changed over the years from people copying and translating the Bible in different ways. And of course, even if the Bible is real, Genesis, the first book in the Bible, would be an ancient human's description of cosmic events, and they wouldn't really have had the language or understanding that we have today. All things considered, it's pretty accurate. The point here is that science and religion can and often do match up, and those compatibility issues are usually manufactured by one side or the other. Maybe God and science are the same. Maybe science is just the way that God interacts with the world. Maybe quantum weirdness is God. Who knows? All this to say that if we're flexible with the interpretation of the Bible and take religion into account when we're doing science, then they don't really conflict with each other all that much. Personally, I don't think that much, if any, of the Bible is meant to be taken literally. And there's a lot more unknown things in science than we like to think that there is. Science and religion are two sides of the same coin, and that coin is just our understanding of the universe. We've been brought into this fake war of science versus religion when the reality is that they have more in common than different. I know this video was a little different than what I normally post, but I think that the relationship between science and religion is an important thing to talk about. Normally I make videos that are more science focused, but if you want to see more videos like this, let me know. Anyway, if you liked the video, make sure that you like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you want to see more stuff about science and religion, or if there's a specific topic that you want to hear me talk about. Thanks for watching, and remember to stay curious.